Hello and welcome to yet another episode of 177 Nations of Tasmania. Ghana is a West African country rich in resources. It was formerly known as the Gold Coast and it's currently Africa's biggest producer of gold, but it's perhaps most famous for being one of the world's biggest producers of cocoa beans. However, unfortunately, like many African countries, the people have not always benefited from these resources. Now, my guest for this episode is Desmond, who grew up in a rural area of Ghana. And though he had access to education, facilities, as you will hear, left a lot to be desired. But despite this, Desmond became the first from his school to go to university, and this path would eventually lead to him doing a Ph.D. in Australia and to his current position as a lecturer in management at the University of Tasmania. In this episode, we discuss life and community in Ghana, including their unique way of celebrating funerals, and I use the word celebrate purposely, and some of the challenges for a Ghanaian trying to adjust to some of the major social differences in Australia.
I'm originally from Ghana. I was brought up from the northern part of Ghana, northern Upper East region to be specific. And I think I did my basic education in the Upper East, and I relocated to the middle belt of the country, which is Brown and Half region, to do my higher education. After my higher education, completing my first degree, I got a job offer in the same university as a teaching assistant, and after which I was then retained as a tutor, and I did further studies in the Asante region, in KN University to be precise, after which I returned back to Brown to continue with my work. And then in 2014, I relocated to Australia after getting a scholarship to pursue a Ph.D. in Curtin University. Living in kind of countryside, as Australia will call it, in a rural area, having limited access to opportunities in terms of modern facilities. Primary school was quite okay because we had quite a number of teachers. But then in moving to secondary school, where I actually attended a day school, we didn't have electricity. Even a place to sleep was very difficult. I remember we were sleeping on the floor because we didn't have beds, we didn't have dining hall, there was no, so you have to feed yourself. And we had to use lantern as a mode of electricity to study. So it was quite difficult going through that process. And I remember it got a point you have very few teachers, and even in some subjects we didn't even have teachers at the time. So we had to contribute money as students to then kind of get somebody to come and teach us some aspects of some subjects to be able to kind of catch up with our colleagues before we write our final exams. And I think I was fortunate because I think in the history of the school, I was the first candidate to actually pass all my subjects to get into the university from that particular secondary school. It was a happy moment for me, being the first candidate to do so, and also looking at the opportunities that one will have in terms of getting access to furthering your education at the time. Currently, we have almost 100 private universities.
Okay.
But then if you want to count the number of public universities, you'll be looking at less than 15. So at the time, it was very difficult to really get access to public university because of the number of students coming out of secondary school and also looking at the limited space available in those schools. So I ended up attending a private university, which the fees were very expensive because we're paying about $2,000 a year at the time. And you can imagine having to get your parents to be able to raise that money from countryside was really very difficult and very challenging. But then at least I was able to get that opportunity. A lot of my colleagues could not afford, because if you don't have access to resources, you can't possibly be able to attend a private university in Ghana.
And so what did your family do? What did they live from?
My mom is a petty trader. She's into small business in terms of selling provisions. And my dad is a farmer. So it was through that small business activities that they were able to raise that money to get me into university.
And did you come from a big family?
Yes, not really big. I think we are 6 in number. I'm the firstborn of my parents. And I have 3 sisters and 2 other guys. So having kind of a sizable family with limited resources, but having to make sure that we all attend school was really challenging. But then they were still able to do something to be able to help push my education.
And as the firstborn, so to speak, does that mean that you had a bit of a burden of responsibility?
Sure. Yeah. In our part of the world, mostly the firstborn takes up family responsibility. So you do see that, and it's one of the key challenges that you have very few middle income earners from Africa because of the dependency ratio. So it is now your responsibility to take care of your siblings and to take care of your parents as they grow old and they are not able to actively engage in work. So I now have to take that responsibility for my parents and for my kids, brothers and sisters. So it's quite challenging and but then it's part of the culture and environment that you need to also be able to give back to your family for the support they gave you growing up.
So by the sounds of it, Ghana, or at least the area you lived in, was very much a bit of a collective mentality.
So yeah, there's that kind of system where you just don't have to look within your parents and your siblings, but also the extended family, your uncles, children. Sometimes you might even look beyond just the extended family, but even the wider community. You have people calling you, they need help, and sometimes you are compelled to do so because you see such people as part of your family, not just your blood relations, but because you are all coming from the same community, you see them as a brother or a sister. So in most cases, you do see a lot of the time we refer to people from our community as our brothers, our sisters. Sometimes we are not even related by blood, but that is how we see ourselves. So you call the person your brother, your sister.
And what was the environment like where you grew up? Was it a village or a town?
Yes, it was a small village, but then we had the opportunity to get electricity very early in the 90s. Also, depending on the location of the village, you need to be able to pass through my village to other major towns. So there was no way you could get an electricity to major towns without connected electricity to those villages. So we had that opportunity to get electricity at a very in the early stages of Ghana's development. And also we had potable water, we had good roads and at the time, but now you do see a lot of challenges in terms of the issue of roads, but to some extent we still have very good roads to my village, but to other communities it's still very challenging to be able to get those kind of facilities. So I was fortunate to come from a town where we still have those kind of basic facilities. My strongest memory from childhood, I think, mostly is that community relations, where you have that social interactions with your friends, with your family, which probably it's not very common, especially in developed countries. So we call it social life because we used to eat together from one bowl. So I think I remember where I think every evening we have to go to about 3-4 homes to eat with my friends. So we go to their house to eat, and then after eating from their house, we go to the next person. So all the 5 of us will have to go and eat from each of us homes. And that was really very interesting, and also then helped to build that kind of social cohesion and friendship, because having to eat from the same bowl, having to share things with your colleagues. Sometimes you can even walk to your friend's house to eat without his presence. So far as there's food in the house, you have access to that without necessarily having to wait for your friend to even come home. So these are things that I really will always remember. And it was so much fun living in such kind of environment, and now having to live in a different environment where those kind of activities are very limited in terms of that.
I was going to ask whether that was something that maybe you missed about living here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I miss. And even growing up, even you have friends that after work, you catch up every evening before going home. But then that kind of experience, you probably wouldn't be able to have that, because you call a friend here, oh, let's catch up for some beer. And then he's like, oh, I'm going for work, or I have to go and sleep because I have a morning shift. But then back in Ghana, we don't have that kind of work system. So it's quite a bit flexible. So you mostly will meet your colleagues after work before going home, which is kind of a regular activity that we do almost every day throughout the week, which probably you can't possibly do in Australia.
When you were at school, by the sound of it, it was quite a challenging time by the sounds of it. Did you sort of have any kind of ambition or plan about what you would do once you finished?
That's a very interesting question. Because of the kind of environment we're coming from, it was very difficult to actually know what you really want to do when you grow up. So I didn't really have anything in mind from primary school to senior high school. All I was thinking is to be able to pass my exams, because we believe that if you pass your exams, you can be able to get into the university. But then it was until I got to the university that I then, started thinking about, I'll probably want to be a lecturer when I complete my university education in the future, and a consultant. I think so. These were the two things, in my mind. But then at the basic level, we never had the opportunity to really think about what I want to be, because it's not an environment that really creates that opportunity for you to actually know what your talents are, and what you really think you can be able to do in such space. So until you get a certain level before you then begin to have that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
And I only got that after during my university first degree, and then I probably would, it would be good to be a lecturer or a consultant, work with an NGO. And so when I finished my first degree, I was actually, I think, one of the registrar of the school, and actually approached me and said, oh, don't you want to be a teaching assistant as part of your national service? And I was like, no, probably didn't want to go into that kind of space. I was thinking maybe go to a secondary school and teach. But then she convinced me that, it was a good opportunity to be able to achieve my career objective. So I was like, So I took up the opportunity to serve as a teaching assistant as part of my national service. So fortunately for me, after the national service, the university retained me as a tutor, and then I proceeded to do my master's. I came back and I got promoted to assistant lecturer, and then I left to then pursue my Ph.D. and here I am working still within the university environment, and I enjoy every bit of.
What put the idea in your head to be a lecturer? Was there anything in particular or some influence that prompted that?
I didn't want to be a teacher at the basic level because you saw that a lot of them were not really making very good progress.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that if it is to be a high school teacher or a primary school teacher, then I probably wouldn't want to be a teacher. But then a lecturer at a university, at least there's an opportunity. You see that opportunity to be able to develop yourself to the higher level. At least you'll be able to do a PhD at that level. But then during my first degree studies, we used to have group studies. And in most instances, my friends will usually ask me to come and lead the group. The most difficult subjects, they rather will push those subjects for me to lead. Mm-hmm. And that then requires that I have to go and do my private studies before I come to be able to lead the group. And because you wouldn't want to go there and disgrace yourself. Mm-hmm. So I will have to then go and sit somewhere privately, study, and then come and then lead a group. So after that, your colleagues will say, oh, I think after you have explained these concepts, I think I now get it even much more clearer than the lecturer. So it was through that process I got to realize that, then I can possibly be a teacher. If I can be able to explain things to my colleagues and they even understand better than the lecturer, then I think I should be able to be a teacher and be able to share knowledge with other people. And that was how I developed the interest in becoming a lecturer.
And you mentioned that your father was a farmer. What kind of farming, what kind of crops did he have?
It was mainly groundnuts and then maize. And considering the nature of the weather in the north, it's very difficult to have rain consistently for 4 good months. So you do see that it limits you to the kind of crops that you have to grow, because you are looking at having less rain consistently for more than 3 months. So maize is usually very easier because maize will only need 90 days, 3 months. Mm-hmm. So it's quite good for that particular weather. And then also with groundnut, because of the nature of the soil, it's actually good for groundnut than other crops. So our part of the north, we are also fortunate to have an irrigation that connects to my village. So the cultivation of tomatoes was actually very common in the early 90s. But then in recent times, that has not been fruitful because of challenges with the expansion and the renovation of that particular tunnel irrigation dam. So we do have limited access to that irrigation compared to the early 90s.
And you mentioned funerals, which just reminded me of something I'd seen about Ghana, is that I've seen pictures of pretty amazing funerals, which are very different to what we're used to here.
Yeah, I think funerals are really very, it's recognized as one of the priority activities where we believe that the person needs to be given a befitting celebration after death. And we believe that that probably will create some opportunity for the person to join his or her maker. So we do spend a lot of resources in celebrating funerals. So I usually call it celebrating funerals because it's not mourning. It's more of a celebration because you do see a lot of activities like dancing. It's more of kind of an opportunity for people to meet and also be able to share with each other some of the support that they have for the person who probably is responsible for organizing the funeral. And it is expected that as you attend funerals, when you also have a funeral in your home, you would likely have family members, friends, and the community. And in most instances, you don't even need to invite people. They come to sympathize with you because they are part of that community. So it's not like you are given an invitation to attend this funeral. Only few people may be invited, but the community will usually be present without any invitation because they are coming to support you because you've lost a loved one, and they believe that when they also lose a loved one, you will be present. So kind of an opportunity to support each other during the period of difficulty in your life.
It's very interesting because it's such a different way of, or a different attitude towards death and, as you say, more of a celebration than a mourning, which I think maybe is a healthier way to deal with that kind of loss.
Yeah, it's a healthy way because then it takes away the mental stress that these families or individuals will go through. So I think it helps to be able to heal people who have losing their family members, and because you have so many people coming to show solidarity, support, and that then help to be able to moderate the stress that you probably will have to go through if you have to go through this alone. But now here is the case, you have so many, even an entire community, depending on your social status. If you are a very popular person in the community, you would likely have the entire community in your home supporting you, showing solidarity during such difficult moments. So I think it's one of the things I really like about Africa, because it's when you are in difficulty, you have people coming to support you without you necessarily reaching out to them. And they also expect that when they are also in difficulty, you reach out to them without necessarily waiting for somebody to request for assistance, which is really very supportive. And that is what I believe it's more of kind of an environment that is supportive and allow people to help each other. Our system, especially in Ghana, is structured in such a way that every family, you have the family head. So most decisions that impact on the entire family, you do see that there is that level of consultation with the family head. So you probably have to get the family head involved, and he will then call other family members to come together to decide on what we need to do. And mostly, especially during funerals, that is one of the, or maybe marriage ceremonies or other activities that will involve the entire family. You have that kind of collective decision making, which is really good. But if it's about your own personal life, mostly you would want to maybe limit the level of consultation, because sometimes you might think that maybe they don't really understand your own perspective. So you probably would want to, but most instances you still want once in a while want to hear from elderly people about their view of some of the decisions that you want to take as a family member. In our environment, marriage is not the individuals involved. It is the families involved. And that is where sometimes you might not even be involved directly, because it's something that your parents, your other family members will have to do on your behalf. So even if I'm going to get married, I don't need to even go with them. It is rather the family members who will have to go through the processes. I remember when I was getting married to my wife, I was in Australia.
Oh, really?
When the traditional processes were being carried out by my dad and my other family members. So until I got home, and then I had to then go with them just to be able to let the family members know that I'm the person getting married to their daughter. But then in terms of the traditional rites, most of the time you don't even need to be involved. It is rather your family members who are supposed to take that responsibility.
Okay.
So it's quite very interesting where you have to, the family members will have to do that on your behalf.
What are the things that the parents are looking for, I guess, or does it vary from family to family?
Yeah, it varies from family to family. And sometimes I usually term some of them stereotyping, because of the level of diversity. So you do see some parents try to draw from historical experiences.
Okay.
And sometimes they stereotype or prejudice about certain communities. They believe that, women or men from these communities they exhibit certain kind of personality traits, which may or may not necessarily be true.
Sure.
But these kind of stereotyping and prejudice sometimes can impact on decisions of your parents to kind of support or not support your decision to marry from a particular tribe. So, but then with the level of education, you do see that this level of interference is kind of moderating as compared to in 30 years, 20 years ago. And it was also very interesting that because I have witnessed certain marriages where you can meet a lady in the marketplace and decide to marry the person without her knowledge. But then at the end of the day, that marriage works.
Right.
So surprising. But in today's world, you definitely cannot do that. And that probably wouldn't work. But in the olden days, we have instances where they can even, your family can even marry for you. Like in my case, I might be in Australia and my parents can decide to marry a woman for me in those days.
Tell me what brought you to Tasmania in the first place, and what are you doing here currently?
I think mostly I will say it's a job. I finished my Ph.D. in Curtin University in Western Australia. So after my graduation, I got a job offer with the University of Tasmania as a lecturer. So I decided to relocate to Tasmania.
And tell me a bit about what is the job? Like, what do you do?
I'm a lecturer in management. I teach at the postgraduate and the undergraduate level. I teach foundations of management and applied human resource management at the undergraduate level. And I do some research as well. Mostly my research is into human resource management in multinational organizations in developing countries.
And what were your first impressions, actually?
My first impression coming to Tasmania was the difficulty in getting accommodation. It took me quite a number of weeks where I had to live in an apartment which was quite expensive. I was paying about $180 a night. And it was really difficult to get accommodation. I actually inspected about 15 houses. and I never got a place. So I decided to then use Facebook, and I was fortunate to contact one landlord who then offered me a one-unit apartment in Newtown. So my first experience, especially with housing, was really very terrible. Having to go to inspection, and we were about 60 people for one house. So that was my, I think, initial experience. It was because of the nature of the city as well, and being new in town. There was instances where you were booked to visit, to inspect a house, and within 30 minutes to time, they sent you an email and said, oh, there was no need for you to come and inspect the place. It has already been allocated to somebody else. And I'm like, wow. So it was later on, I tried to find out why because I had about 3 or 4 experiences with that. And somebody was telling me, oh, mostly it's about, getting to know a lot of the agents, and they can easily be able to get you in contact with the landlord. So I was a bit surprised.
Were there any other things, at least sort of especially at the beginning, that were maybe a challenge to adapt to?
I think not really. Apart from the accommodation, I was very comfortable with the environment because very small city. You can easily get into the city in less than 15 minutes. So I was very excited, especially where I was living in Newtown. Sometimes you can even decide to walk to the city. So it was really exciting for me. And also so many tourist sites that you can easily visit. And these are things that you probably would have to spend 40 minutes, 50 minutes if you are living in mainland to be able to get into these interesting sites. So I really enjoyed my initial experience in Tasmania, apart from just the difficulty in actually getting housing. It was really a very great experience, and I've enjoyed my stay in. Sometimes my colleagues will tell me, oh, why not move to mainland? I really find it difficult to make that decision to move to mainland because I really enjoy this place because the environment is so natural and you have the opportunity to be able to move around, freely. And it is also very good, especially for younger families.
Yeah.
Because you have the opportunity to be able to be very close with your kids, get them to parks very easy. Compared to mainland where there's so much, traffic, where you probably will have to maybe travel maybe 20 minutes, 30, 40 minutes before you get to a park. But in Tasmania, you probably be looking at 6-7 minutes. You have a park, sometimes less than that.
And has it been easy to sort of build social connections, to sort of make networks, that kind of thing?
In terms of social connections, it's not that easy, but mostly with colleague immigrants, it is much easier to start that social connection with immigrants because they are also coming from different environments, and they are also looking to build social network and that social cohesion in the community. So I will usually advise people, as an immigrant, your starting point is other immigrants before you then get into the main community. But one interesting thing I've noticed about Tasmania is the older people are more sociable than the younger ones. And it's something that I've observed over periods.
Yeah, okay.
So you do see that it is much easier to interact with elderly people in Tasmania compared to the younger ones. Talking about those who are originally from Tasmania. mostly the elderly people are more sociable and more approachable, and want to have that connection, that engagement with immigrants than the younger ones, which is quite strange. Because I was thinking should be the other way around. The younger population should rather be more sociable and more open to that engagement or connection with immigrants.
In terms of cultural differences, what would you say would be the biggest differences between Australia and Ghana, or the biggest things you've noticed?
I think the biggest differences will generally be that in Australia, a lot of the things are more individualistic in nature. The way people live their lives is more kind of individualistic. But in Ghana, we still build on that collectivist orientation, where you think that the collective interest is paramount to individual interests. But you do see that in Australia, individual interest is more paramount, and people would want to have that orientation in this kind of environment. So you see that. And then secondly, you look at the family structure. You do see that we are still strongly built around the extended family system, where you still have to look at the interests of your extended family members, whilst in Australia it is more narrow to the immediate family, your wife and your children, with limited scope for that extended family responsibility. So even sometimes when you look at your kids will have to leave you. In Ghana, if you are not married, you cannot leave the home. Yes, you have to stay with your parents until you are married or you have a job in a different city that requires you to leave. But if you are all living in the same city, you are working in the same city, there is no motivation to leave your parents, because if you even relocate, when they grow old, you will still want to come back and take care of them. So then what will be the point in moving out of the house, which is not something that is very common in Australia. You do see that after 18, 19 years, these kids will... So sometimes that is one of my biggest concern in this kind of environment. I feel that insecurity of losing sight of my children when they turn 18. So it means I'll probably be living alone without my kids around. But if I was in Ghana, that level of insecurity won't be something that I'll think about. But here, I think about it all the time. That within some few years, my children will leave the house and I will end up living with my wife alone, which is really something that I'm concerned about.
Okay. So how old are your kids now?
My first son is 11 years. He will be 12 in January. My second son is 3 years. And my little daughter is 9 months.